I am Barbara, serving as your host today, and Brother Pete is here as your co-host.
Yes, I'm glad to have you along with us.
And the topic really is, what do you do on New Moon Day, or what do you do on Transition Day? If there's a 30-day month, there would be a day 30, and then day 1 is New Moon Day. So what do you do on those days? So the modern calendar has months ranging in length from 28 days to 31 days, and the months are not tied to anything in nature. Consequently, the week cycles continuously and without interruption from one month to the next, from one year to the next is how they go.
The Creator's calendar, on the other hand, bases each month on the movement of the moon. Each month begins with the new moon. The week, being a division of the month, restarts its cycle every new moon. And quoting from the Encyclopedia Biblica, the Hebrew month is a lunar month, and the quarter of this period, one phase of the moon, appears to be determined the week of 7 days. The Hebrew Sabbaton was celebrated at intervals of 7 days, corresponding with changes in the moon's phases. This is the hardest point to comprehend when first beginning to study the calendar of creation. The modern solar calendar has a continuous weekly cycle. The calendar of creation, as the Bible presents it, does not. New moons have no corresponding day in the Gregorian calendar, with its months divorced from anything in nature. Thus, many people are confused over what to do on new moon or how to observe it. Scripture reveals several things about the observance. Quote, in the time of the earliest prophets, the new moon stood in the same line with another lunar observance, the Sabbath, that from Schreiber's Dictionary of the Bible. New moons were non-commerce days. New moons were days of worship, and new moons were days of thanksgiving.
So new moon days are non-commerce days. So when in apostasy, the Jews resented having to close their stores for Sabbaths and new moons, the Bible records the lament of these greedy merchants in Amos 8, 5 through 7.
Amos 8, 5, 7. And when will the new moon be gone, that we may sell corn, and the Sabbath, that we may set forth wheat, making the ephah small and the shekel great, and satisfying the balances of deceit, that we may buy the poor for silver, and the needy for a pair of shoes, yea, and sell, and the refuse of the wheat. Yahweh hath sworn by the excellence of Jacob, surely I will never forget any of their works.
The work done for the tabernacle, however, was allowable. And Yah spake unto Moses, saying, on the first day of the first month shalt thou set up the tabernacle of the tent of congregation. And he said this in Exodus 40, 1-2, and 16 through 17. Thus did Moses according to all that Yah commanded him, so he did. And it came to pass in the first month, in the second year, on the first day of the month, that would be New Moon Day, that the tabernacle was reared up. So it is possible, but unknown, that other forms of work were acceptable to perform on new moon. However, no work that generated income, no commerce was to be performed on new moon, nor any other routine labor that could be performed on other days. New moons were originally days of worship. In the time of the earliest prophets, the new moon stood in the same line with another lunar observance, the Sabbath. And that, again, is from Scribner's Dictionary of the Bible.
Where Scripture is silent, history can shed additional light. An early edition of the Universal Jewish Encyclopedia states that new moons were originally days for worship. Sabbath and new moon, Rosh Chodesh, were periodically reoccurring in the course of the year. Quote, the new moon is still, and the Sabbath originally was, dependent upon the lunar cycle, end quote. Both date back to the nomadic period of Israel. Originally, the new moon was celebrated in the same way as the Sabbath. Gradually, it became less important, while the Sabbath became more and more a day of religion and humanity, of religious meditation and instruction, of peace and delight of the soul. Universal Jewish Encyclopedia, page 410.
So, New Moon Day is a category of day. New Moon Day is neither a Sabbath day nor a working day. It is a third category of day on which worship is commanded, and even the sacrifices were different as part of its distinction from other feasts. And so you can see over here on the right, on New Moon Day, there was 2 times for the bull, 2, 1 of the ram, and 7 lambs. So you will see on a Sabbath, there were no bulls or rams. There were 2 lambs at probably morning and evening, totaling 4. And but New Moon Day had 2 bulls, 1 ram, 7, and 9. So it was much more on New Moon Day than even on a Sabbath. So it was a very important day. Okay, worship of the Creator. Because your love is better than life, my lips will glorify you. I will praise you as long as I live, and in your name I will lift up my hands. Psalm 63, 3-4. And New Moon days were days of thanksgiving.
New moons were a time for families to get together, share a meal, and rejoice over the blessings of the past month, rededicating themselves to Yahweh for the new. Both the Bible and extra-biblical sources present new moon as a day for taking time to spend with family and friends over a meal. Some sources suggest it was a day when women in particular were freed from many burdens of housework. Other passages of Scripture reveal that new moons, like Sabbaths, were a time when people would go to make special inquiries of the prophets.
Okay, well, what about translation days? Everybody asked that question. What about translation days?
Translation days, or transition days, like new moons, have no direct correlation in the modern solar calendar. However, it is necessary to understand what they are in order to have a clear comprehension of Yahweh's calendar. Transition day is an astronomical term that is not found in Scripture. However, the fact that the biblical months were based on the cycles of the moon is sufficient proof that they existed in the biblical calendar. According to the United States Naval Observatory, a lunation is 29.5 days long. Generally speaking, this equates to every other month having 29 days and off months having 30 days. A lunation never has less than 29 or more than 30 days. This is a demonstrable astronomical fact.
Astronomers use the term translation day to designate the 30th day of a lunation. It falls at the end of a lunar cycle on the black moon and when the moon cannot be seen. Because time itself is continuous, many have believed that the system by which time is calculated must also by default be continuous. This is a whole quote from Zerubavel. Anyways, and this is an error of assumption to assume everything is continuous. Originally, all ancient calendars were lunisolar, with a weekly cycle of varying lengths, restarting every new moon. Chronologists date the first calendar with a continuous weekly cycle to Babylon around 600 BC. And prior to that time, no calendar utilized a weekly cycle that had no interruption. The weekly cycle restarted either at the beginning of the month, the new lunation, or at the beginning of the year, following 5 intercalculated days that closed the previous year but were not part of any weekly cycle.
Confusion over translation days has led some people to reject the biblical lunar solar calendar. The fourth commandment states clearly, 6 days thou art labor and do all thy work, but the 7th day is the Sabbath of Yahweh thy Elohim. That's Exodus 29:10. Not understanding translation days has led to the false assumption that in a 30-day month there is a total of 9 days between the 7th day Sabbath and the 29th of the 1 month, and the next 7-day Sabbath on the 8th of the new month. This appears to create a problem because that time span is greater than 6 workday intervals between Sabbaths prescribed in the 4th commandment. However, because new moons are a type of holy day, there are never more than 6 work days between worship days.
A lunar month never has more than 30 days, and it's never shorter than 29 days. Thus, the day following the 30th, which is new moon, always begins the new month. There are occasionally consecutive months having 29 days or 30 days as regulated by the moon. All time must be accounted for. Thus, translation days are not non-days, as some have suggested. They have a date, the 30th of every 30-day month. The 30th of the month, like the first of the month, was not part of the 7-day weekly cycle. However, it was counted and it did have a date.
The assumption that there will be too many work days between Sabbaths comes from not understanding that the new moon itself is a worship day that starts a new cycle of 4 weeks, 6 work days, each followed by a 7th Sabbath. As the new moon begins the new weekly cycle for the new month, translation days are not part of that weekly cycle, even though they are a day with a date. Translation days, which are always the 30th on a lunar month, can never be transferred to the next month or counted as a date in the new month, because the next month always starts with New Moon Day, which is the day following Translation Day. With the new moon, a new cycle of 4 weeks begins. Interestingly enough, this confusion always arises among those of the West who have only ever known a calendar with a continuous weekly cycle. In countries that use lunar calendation for their religious calendars, an easier concept to grasp. Yahweh has always clearly specified by name or date which days are to be kept holy. Thus, all days that are not specifically designated as holy days are work days. There are never more than 6 work days in between rests, as new moons are rest days.
Yah's holy convocations, including new moons, are a time for renewed commitment to the Creator, a time to slow down, acknowledge the Father's gifts of family and friends and other blessings. New moons bring a blessing to all who will set aside this time to acknowledge the blessing of Yah. They will be kept throughout all eternity, as the saved rejoice in the endless blessings of the loving Creator. So we know in the new earth, Isaiah 66:23 says,
"And it shall come to pass that from one new moon to another, and from one Sabbath to another, shall all flesh come to worship before me, saith Yahweh."
So I encourage you to learn more about new moon days, how to watch for new moon days, how to know when conjunction is, if the sliver starts the first week. All those things are on our website, and we have a lot of YouTube channels that describe all that too. And our website is lunarsabbathday.com. So thank you for being here today, and I appreciate everyone, and I appreciate you too, Brother Pete.
You're welcome.